Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe. It is Tuesday, January 12th. Along with Joe, Willie, and me, we have former U.S. Senator, now in NBC News and MSNBC political analyst, Claire McCaskill. Co-founder of Punchbowl News, Jake Sherman. He's an MSNBC political contributor. He'll be here in just a moment. And former assistant director of the FBI's counterintelligence division, Frank Figliuzzi, joins us this morning. His new book is The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence.
So we got Frank here, so it's good. Hey, Frank, you know, I went to law school. I'm a country lawyer.
Oh, it's going to start this
I really
way?
don't understand these strange words that you all jumble together, but I'd like to read a couple of federal criminal statutes, because I think it's a good place to start this show. Because I think with all of the ground noise that's going on, all of the questions about who voted what way, I think we're missing the bigger picture. And I want federal authorities to know that the people of the United States of America are going to pressure them every day to hold these traitors, to hold these seditionists to the full extent of the law. And I understand there are a lot of people out there who call themselves evangelicals that no longer believe in the Word of God, that now worship false idols, that haven't read the New Testament, haven't read the Gospels. That's fine. That's between you and Jesus, okay? That's between you and Jesus. But when you storm the Capitol, that's between the federal government and you. And we are the people. We are the people. You tried to take over our house. You trashed our house. You beat up our police officers. You tried to kill our speaker. You tried to kill our vice president. You are going to be held accountable. And then maybe when you're in jail for a long time, maybe somebody can slip you a Bible and you can start reading the Gospels again, and maybe even read some of the Old Testament about what happens to nations when they worship false idols. So with that as a backdrop,
Good morning, everyone.
Section 2384, seditious conspiracy. And stop me if this doesn't apply. Keep the picture. Well, there you go. There you go. If two or more persons in any state or territory are in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or to force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States, contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined not more than $5,000 and imprisoned not more than 6 years. There are others that actually were updated. I get it. That's a 1948.
This one says not more than 20 years or both.
Now, of course, it was updated in 1994, and it updated it, Frank, to 20 years. And so, Frank, you look at the language. Let's put it up one more time. You look at the language, Frank, and you tell me how these people who were breaking into the Capitol, who are now whimpering and whining when they're being taken off of airplanes, they don't understand that they've committed treason against the United States of America, that they are involved in a seditious conspiracy by force, hinder, delay the execution of any law of the United States. But Frank, that's the thing. This wasn't just any law. This was actually one of the cornerstones of the United States Constitution. This was the part of the Constitution that separated us from every other country in the world. John Adams did it first in 1800 when he voluntarily walked away from the presidency after he lost. He didn't seize power. It shocked countries across the world that this grand new constitutional republic would have a peaceful transfer of power. And so there it was, written in the United States Constitution to guarantee that peaceful transfer of power. And this was the date that the Constitution set that our representatives, our elected representatives, were to count the electoral votes as required by the Constitution of the United States. And those people on the screen, I'm sorry, I'm a simple country lawyer, but even I can figure out that is a conspiracy to commit sedition against the United States of America. Please tell me where I'm wrong. And please tell me, if I am not wrong, why the hell these people shouldn't be charged by federal prosecutors to the fullest extent of the law and be sent to prison for 20 years.
Joe, there's a lot to unpack there, but I'm going to take the easiest no-brainer section of the question first. These are seditionists, and you don't need to have a law degree to understand that they have violated the sedition laws of the United States. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the massive crowd that wandered in behind the organizers and the most violent and didn't even realize where they were and took pictures and wondered aloud how this happened. I'm talking about the people who had the intention to do it, traveled with the intention to do it, conspired with others, and enacted violence against not only people, officers, and our legislators, but intended to disrupt our government processes. There is no question that ultimately the charge of sedition applies to them. And here's what's happening, Joe. There's a race against the clock right now with the FBI. They've got a pending inauguration to secure. They've got to build cases like you talked about, identifying organizers, taking an enterprise approach to the investigation. And so what we're seeing is arrest now on complaint. Then we're going to see grand juries sitting and indictments for much, much heavier charges against America. And one of those charges for at least a handful of organizers will be sedition. But I want to go back earlier to something you said, because it's something I'm passionate about. And you mentioned evangelical Christians. You mentioned people who think they're patriots right now and are doing the right thing for America. One of the ways you de-radicalize a population, and sadly, we've learned this lesson from the international terrorism side of things, is that you continually expose people to the truth and you give them other options. The problem is these people have lost sight of their code, their core values. There is misplaced loyalty. They are not loyal to a country anymore. They are loyal to a person. I wrote this book that launches today because the FBI has got it right about how it preserves its core values inside and the nation's core values. I distilled it down to the 7 C's. Guess what the first C is in the book? Code. Codes of conduct come from keeping your eyes on your core values. We have Americans who have lost sight of the core values of America. The second C in my book is conservancy. What's that? The concept that collectively, every single one of us is responsible for preserving the core values of our group, company, community, and country, and we've lost it. The most disturbing thing of all, Joe, that's been developing over the course of the last 48 hours is that we may have had law enforcement officers who have lost their code, lost their core values, don't understand who to be loyal to. And we're hearing reports of 15 Capitol Police officers suspended. We're hearing reports that city police departments across the country are opening internal affairs cases for officers that have lost their way. And sadly, I'm here to tell you that's factoring into the security preparations for the inauguration. Why? Because while we always have counter surveillance looking at perimeters, now we have to have counter surveillance looking at cops during the inauguration of a new president.
Well, and of course, we read and we roll our eyes when we read about problems that Germany's having with neo-Nazis that are infiltrating their police force, that's infiltrating their security forces. We're having the same problem in the United States of America right now. It's a fascist president who's inspiring people to, again, go against their code, Mika.
Yeah.
The code, the Bible, the Constitution, which, of course, hypocritically, they hold up both, but they're worshiping an idol. And you look at their actions, they shall be judged by their actions. They shall be judged by their fruits. This is not even a close call. And as far as being part of this sedition, you know what? If somebody put on their Facebook page, hey, let's go up to the Capitol and stop this. Let's go up to the Capitol and, be part of this revolt that stop, guess what? That's sedition. That is sedition, and those people need to go to jail for 20 years if they came up and broke into the Capitol and trashed the United States
Look at the attacks
Capitol.
on the media here. A rejection of sedition, a rejection of treasonous acts, a rejection of coup attempts. As you said, Joe, separates us from other countries around the world. And Willie, Republicans in Congress who aren't speaking out as vehemently and passionately as Joe is right now, who cannot recognize the accountability that is needed here, how can they call themselves patriots? How can they call themselves servants to this country and not seditionists themselves?
They shouldn't call themselves patriots if they can't condemn what we saw on Wednesday and what we know may be coming on the inauguration next week. We know from reporting, we know from what we're seeing on the internet, we know from what we're hearing talking to members of Congress and national security people, that what we saw last Wednesday may be the undercard to the main event for what's being planned around the inauguration, which is why you're seeing this stepped up security. So Claire McCaskill, the fact that so many of your former Republican colleagues in the Senate and Republicans in the House can't stand up and say once and for all, it may be too late, but say once and for all today, they should have said it a long time ago, that Joe Biden won this election. President Trump got 74 million votes, but he came up short. It was fair and square. It's time to move on and support the new president. You don't have to like what happened, but you have to come to grips with reality. Why? Why can't Republicans stand up and say that to their voters?
The Republicans on Capitol Hill have bought into the lies from day one. They either ignored them or they looked the other way, or worst of all, they embraced them. And the big lie that Donald Trump started committing, the crime against America that Donald Trump really began months ago when he started telling people that believed in him that if he didn't win, the election was a fraud. And he continues to embrace the big lie. And unfortunately, the majority of Republicans on Capitol Hill voted for the big lie, even after they watched Donald Trump's supporters beat police officers with an American flag. So that's where we are. And if we want unity, and I think Joe Biden desperately wants it, I think all of us want unity. We want a coming together. We want to stitch this back together. It has to begin with Republicans acknowledging that there was no massive fraud, that Donald Trump's lawyers had all the evidence, and the evidence was not there. It was rumors. It was internet conspiracies. It was edited videotape. It was people trying to make a buck. It was anything but massive fraud. And until Republicans can do that, until they can reject the big lie, they can't even open their mouths about unity. Shut up about unity until you can state the obvious, that there was a big lie. And by the way, Lindsey Graham did it on the floor that night. He said enough is enough. There were not 82,000 people underage that voted in Georgia. There was not fraud in Georgia. Enough is enough. It's over. He didn't say, I've been lying all this time and I tried to get Georgia to do what the president did. But he at least said it's over and there was no fraud proved.
And Mika, Republicans aren't being asked here to condemn a president's tweet. They're not being asked to condemn something that happened on cable news. They're being asked to stand up in this moment in our country's history and to help prevent a terrorist attack on the United States next week. Read the reporting, talk to national security officials, talk to anyone in Washington. That's what is in the works here. Republicans being asked to stand up and tell the truth. Many of them have had trouble doing that over the last several months around this election, and stop a terrorist attack on America.
Yeah. Well, now to something that hadn't happened in Trump's entire presidency. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy reportedly stood up to him. Axios is reporting that during a 30-minute phone call yesterday with McCarthy, President Trump falsely blamed Antifa people for storming the Capitol last week. That's a lie that they tried to spread around to no avail. A White House official and another source familiar with the call tell Axios that McCarthy would have none of it, telling the president, quote, "It's not Antifa, it's MAGA. I know, I was there." The White House official described the call as tense and aggressive at times, with Trump ranting about election fraud and an exasperated McCarthy cutting in to say, "Stop it, it's over, the election is over."
Stop it, it's over. The election is over. It's not hard, Republicans. Stop it. It's over. The election is over. And if you tell Americans this, Mika, an amazing thing may happen. We may actually be able to prevent further murders of Capitol Hill police officers. We may be able to prevent further abuse against law enforcement officers, the killing of 5 people in the Capitol, insurrection against the United States of America, riots against the United
Security
States
of
of
the
America.
free press.
If they will tell the truth that they know is the truth, that every federal court with Trump judges said was the truth, then maybe those are the words they use. Stop it. It's over. The election is over.
During a conference call with House Republicans yesterday, McCarthy told members that Trump bears some responsibility for the riot. But McCarthy was one of the over 100 House Republicans who voted to challenge Biden's election win. And his newfound pushback against the president may have a lot to do with campaign donations. A growing wave of big businesses say they will suspend or review their campaign donations in the wake of last week's riot at the Capitol. Many are saying they would stop donating to Republicans who objected to the election's certification. The growing list of those corporations includes Dow, Marriott, Blue Cross, American Express, Airbnb, Best Buy, MasterCard, as well as Comcast, the parent company of NBC Universal. So far, 33 companies have either temporarily halted all political action committee donations to lawmakers who voted against certifying electoral college votes, or will take the unprecedented events of last week into account when considering future political donations. Other companies said they are reviewing their procedures for political donations, but they will continue to give money through their political action committees.
Jake Sherman, of course, the race for 2022 in the House begins now. And Kevin McCarthy understands that he can't do that if he's got over 100 members that have the political mark of Cain on them that aren't going to be touched. And what corporations in the United States of America can support a House member that voted for insurrection against the United States of America? At the end of the day, that's what it's all going to boil down to. So did McCarthy have his road to Damascus experience because these corporations started to pull the plug on Republican donations?
Well, a few things to keep in mind. Number one, it's not like you said, Joe, it's not these people who came to the Capitol that are funding Donald Trump and Kevin McCarthy and the Senate Republicans. It's big corporations that give big checks to the NRCC, the party's campaign committees, and super PACs. So you're absolutely right that he has a big problem on his hands. But the larger problem for McCarthy is that I understand what he said on the private call. I get that. But McCarthy on a call yesterday with House Republicans didn't say that. He's not taking responsibility for, or he's not publicly blaming Donald Trump. He's not saying there's going to be any repercussions for his actions. He's not doing the things that shows that he understands publicly what Donald Trump did here. And trust me, I was in the building. I know who was there, but there is nobody who is in that building who is sane and who is a free-thinking, natural, naturally intelligent human being that cannot look at the president and say, You called for people to be strong. You called for people to come up to the Capitol. They came up to my place of work, Kevin McCarthy's place of work, and they stormed the building. So people, normal Republicans in the House Republican Conference, not people who follow QAnon, not these lunatics who believe these conspiracy theories, but real free-thinking people want to hear something from McCarthy, and McCarthy needs to have some sort of reaction here that goes beyond maybe we should censure him, or it's not Antifa. People want to see that from Kevin. I'm hearing that all over. People want to hear some reaction from him.
So, Jake, where does impeachment stand, and especially in light of what these companies are doing and considering the no-fly list story, which we'll get to in just a moment, could that impact impeachment votes? Where does impeachment stand, first of all?
So we have at the top of Punchbowl AM this morning that up to 20 Republicans are expected to vote for impeachment, between 10 and 20. That's a tiny sliver of the 200-member House Republican Conference, but it's massive compared to the 0 Republicans that voted for impeachment back in 2019. I think, listen, I think people are trying to, in the Capitol, find an artful way to break from Trump. But frankly, and I don't say this often, but people just don't have the backbone, and they need to find the backbone, or else people will just consider them to be a joke. So I think impeachment is going to die it's going to pass the House. It's going to die in the Senate, most likely. And they're going to move to the next Congress. But I do think there's just going to be continued ways to try to prevent Donald Trump from getting in the White House again.
Claire, Joe Biden said yesterday he'd like to bifurcate the impeachment process, meaning he wants to begin his agenda on January 20th, but will respect if Democrats in the Senate want to move forward with the trial of impeachment even after the president has left office. There's some legal question about how that would work exactly. But what are you hearing from your old friends around Congress about how this may play out? As Jake said, Democrats already have the votes to impeach that will move quickly. Then it moves to the Senate. What happens from there?
Well, I think what's going to happen, there is a little notice provision that was put in the law. When we had the ricin scare on Capitol Hill, they passed a little resolution that changed the Senate rules that allow the majority leader and the minority leader to call the Senate back from recess without having to have unanimous consent of all 100 members. So what that means is Chuck Schumer is going to be in a position, if the House impeaches and they do it quickly, then Chuck is in the position where he can say to Mitch McConnell, we don't have to wait. All you have to do is sign your name on this piece of paper and we're back in session and we can begin work on an impeachment trial. That will put a lot of pressure on Mitch McConnell, because there are members, I think, that are ready to vote for conviction in the Senate, Republican members, besides Mitt Romney. The bifurcation issue is really just this simple. They could do hearings for confirmations in the morning, and they could conduct the trial in the afternoon. But they have the ability to get started early. All they have to have is the cooperation of one guy, and that's Mitch McConnell.
So, Frank, here we are now almost a week from the time of the Capitol insurrection, the Capitol siege, the Capitol riots. What can you tell us, looking at law enforcement? What are you piecing together? What went wrong?
So I've been calling this not an intelligence failure, but a failure to act on available intelligence. That makes it a security failure. NBC broke the news a couple of days ago that the FBI actually provided its intelligence concerns regarding violence to the Capitol Police, to the Washington Metro Police. Similarly, NYPD Intel Unit did the exact same thing. So not an intelligence failure, but not acting on available intelligence. That raises the question of why. And now we're looking at suspensions of Capitol Police officers. We're hearing about National Guard not being deployed, or deployed, but delayed deployment. And we've got to look at the role of executive leadership in the police department, but farther up, who was pulling the strings and saying, we're going to have a limited footprint. We don't like the optics of this. Was this a strategy? This is where we're headed moving forward. On the manhunt side, the FBI is racing the clock right now. All 56 field offices, monumental task. Joe, I am hearing that they are pulling their hair out with regard to the vast numbers of threats that exist on social media. Imagine it's your job in the New York City field office to wade through people saying, I'm going to blow something up, but they're never going to do it. And people saying, I am headed to DC. You got to make the difference. They don't have the tools to do it, like international terrorism. The whole idea of prevention needs to be examined by the new Congress. What do I mean by that? We still don't have a domestic terrorism law. We still don't treat this like we do international terrorism. Change the religion of some of those people that entered the Capitol, and you've got violent jihadists. You've got the FBI with undercover informants, electronic surveillance, and agents in their groups and organizations because we've designated them as potentially violent. We've got nothing like that going on. So we need to think about how we prevent this moving forward, because the threat is not going away simply because Donald Trump leaves office.
Well, memo to Joe Biden, the first bill he should push Congress to pass and the first bill he should sign would be the defining of domestic terrorism and aggressively going after domestic terrorism in this post-age of Trump. Frank, finally, do you have confidence? Your new book is The FBI Way. Do you have confidence that people inside the FBI are of one accord, that they're moving in one direction, that they're not split like they were in the 2016 election, with a lot of people hating Hillary Clinton, a lot of people hating Donald Trump, and you having competition between the New York office and the D.C. office and all the other offices? Is the FBI way in 2021 hunting down these seditionists, dragging them to jail, and making sure justice is served against each and every one of them?
The FBI is on the job like it's never been before since 9/11. Now, here's the deal. I wrote the book because I know the FBI operates at the highest level of excellence when the stakes matter the most. I know how they do it. I've distilled it down for your viewers in 7 simple C's I call the FBI way. But here's the more disturbing part of answering your question. I have to tell you, the penetration of law enforcement by the Trump ideology. We've had a president who each campaign has held huge Cops for Trump rallies around the country. They are well attended. There are cops wearing QAnon badges on their uniforms. Can I guarantee you that hasn't penetrated federal agencies? I cannot guarantee that. There has been a radicalization process occurring in this country, and law enforcement is not immune to radicalization. And I fear that as we move forward, we're going to hear more and more stories and more investigations of current and former law enforcement and military that have kept their eyes off of democracy and put them onto a single individual. It was a perfect storm. The BLM protests, calls for defunding of the police, a feeling like they're isolated, right? And that they're about to get even axed in some cities. And now you have an isolated, angry population. I can't believe we're talking about counter snipers for the inauguration that have to keep their eyes on cops as well as on protesters.
Good God. Are we here? It appears we are. The new book is The FBI Way, Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence. Former Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, Frank Figliuzzi. Thank you very much. And co-founder of Punchbowl News, Jake Sherman. Thank you as well.
Hey, Jake, what's Punchbowl's lead today? What are readers of Punchbowl getting today in their inbox?
Well, the 20 people are going to vote for impeachment. And we talk about McCarthy and the problems that he faces and the deep divide in the House Republican Conference, Joe, between people like Liz Cheney, who are speaking up against the president, and Kevin McCarthy, who is towing the line at the moment. And there's an amazing amazing divide on the conference call yesterday, on the House Republican conference call between Lauren Boebert, who's a QAnon believer, and Nancy Mace of South Carolina, who's proving herself to be a mainstream Republican. And Mace was decrying the fact that the party is being led by QAnon fanatics at the moment, which is something that you could probably sympathize with a little bit. But this divide, Joe, is as bad as it's ever been.
We are not here to curse the darkness. We are here to light a candle.
I'm Chuck Rosenberg. On my podcast, The Oath, I talk with people who served with integrity and honor, men and women who light the way. This week, former head of the Guantanamo Review Task Force, Matt Olson.
The initial idea of Guantanamo was ill-conceived, that there could be sort of a legal black hole where we could hold detainees. And it remains a problem in our history, I think, from a counterterrorism perspective.
Join me for Season 4 of The Oath, an MSNBC podcast. Search for The Oath wherever you're listening right now and subscribe. New episodes every Wednesday.
Oof. Still ahead on Morning Joe, with President Trump facing a second possible impeachment trial. We'll be joined by two Democratic lawmakers who also served as impeachment managers during his first trial. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries and Adam Schiff will both be our guests this morning. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
In a season of chaos, the Crimson Tide are the conference. Constant excellence. Bama bludgeons the Buckeyes, and Saban steps past Paul Bryant with his 7th national championship.
Chris Fowler on the call last night for ESPN as Alabama won its 6th national title in 12 years, blowing out a good Ohio State team 52-24. The Heisman Trophy winner Devontae Smith had 3 touchdowns, 215 yards receiving, all in the first half. They didn't even need him to do anything in the second half. He was incredible. Mac Jones, the quarterback, Najee Harris, the running back, ran in for a couple of touchdowns. The game really was never close. Joe, Nick Saban, who doesn't get too excited after games, said he thinks this is the ultimate team. Mac Jones, the quarterback, said, "I think we're the best team ever to play." You can make a case for that offense, certainly. Again, your Tide rolls on to another title.
You know, I agree. Looking at this team last night, it's certainly the best offense I've ever seen at the University of Alabama, the best offensive coordinator I've ever seen. Well, he's tied with Lane Kiffin. We never put Lane Kiffin second to anybody. Best quarterback at Alabama this century easily. He just is cut. He is cut out to play at New England, Patriots under Belichick. Best wide receiver, not only at Alabama, but in college football ever, most likely. My favorite running back at Alabama in Najee Harris since Johnny Musso. In the early 70s. And you got to say, Willie, the greatest football coach, certainly of our time, and would be hard-pressed to not say of all time what they've accomplished over the last 10, 11, 12 years. What is it? He's won 7 national championships. And
yeah, he's won 7, and he passed
years.
Bear Bryant, the great Bear Bryant, of course, for the most ever by a major college football coach. So even objectively, he's the best college coach of all time. Well, Alabama is the national champ. Yeah,
and I'll say, Willie, too, I'd love to get your input on this. As we get older, we understand that these are kids that are throwing a ball around. And what we were always told when we played football in high school and kids played football in college, that it was about character building. And tell you what, this has been a tough season for all of these teams. They've stayed in a bubble. They've stayed away from their families. And you look at Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, showed such great humility. So many kids at that ceremony, the Heisman ceremony, showed such great humility. I saw it there again last night. This has been, a lot of those Alabama kids could have been multimillionaires. A lot of them decided to stay for this one final year to win the national championship, and shows real character. Speaking of that, Willie, as you know, the nation's highest civilian honor has been turned down by New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick. The 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach had agreed to accept the Medal of Freedom when he was offered that award that honor by President Trump, but has now declined it. And in a statement, he said this: "Recently, I was offered the opportunity to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which I was flattered by out of respect for what the honor represents and admiration for prior recipients. Subsequently, the tragic events of last week occurred, and the decision has been made not to move forward with the award. Above all, I am an American citizen with great reverence for our nation's values, freedom, and democracy. I know I also represent my family and the New England Patriots team. One of the most rewarding things in my professional career took place in 2002 when, through the great leadership within our team, conversations about social justice, equality, and human rights moved to the forefront and became actions. Continuing those efforts while remaining true to the people, team, and country I love outweigh the benefits of any individual award. A White House official tells NBC News the White House has been made aware of Belichick's decision. This certainly, for anybody, especially a football coach, this is an honor that a lot wouldn't pass up, but I guess it shows just how remarkable, Willie, the events of the last week have been.
Yeah, when we saw this on the schedule this week, a lot of people wondered, my gosh, after what happened on Wednesday, is Bill Belichick really going to step forward and accept a medal from President Trump? He came out yesterday and put out that statement. It may seem like a small thing to some people. Okay, a football coach declines a medal. But when Bill Belichick does this, when Arnold Schwarzenegger makes that speech the other day, they're speaking to audiences who have great respect for them and who listen to them and who may tune into them in a way they don't listen to a politician or a member of the media. It matters what leaders like this do and say, and it was good to see Bill Belichick step up and do the right thing.
You know, Willie, I'm so glad you brought up Arnold Schwarzenegger, because Schwarzenegger, like Belichick, you're exactly right. Those are the people that are going to at least be able to slightly penetrate a group that have been part of this cult. It's not going to be, Chuck Schumer or politician. It's not going to be talking heads on cable news shows. It will be people like Arnold Schwarzenegger that a lot of Americans have grown up with. And when he takes out that Conan sword, yeah, sure, a lot of people might think that's a little over the top. The audience that it's intended for doesn't think it's over the top, and he makes a great point with it. And Belichick and Schwarzenegger, you're right. Those are two voices that could break through and actually move some minds.
Yeah, and if they stop one or two people from doing what they're talking about doing next week, not just in Washington, but at state capitals across the country, it will have been worth the stand that they've taken in the last couple of days.
For sure. Up next, of Donald Trump. We're back in a moment.
I want to be clear to those who lead this department who you will serve. You won't work for me. You are not the president or the vice president's lawyer. Your loyalty is not to me. It's to the law, the Constitution, the people of this nation, to guarantee justice.
President-elect Joe Biden speaking when he nominated Merrick Garland for Attorney General. But what will happen if the Justice Department does decide to pursue prosecution against Trump? Joining us now, longtime media executive, CNBC founder and contributor, and editor-at-large at Newsweek, Tom Rogers. He's out with a new piece for the magazine, a 10-point guide to the prosecution of Donald Trump. Also with us, professor in law at Georgetown University and a former trial attorney with the United States Department of Justice, Paul Butler. He is an MSNBC legal analyst.
So, Paul, let me begin with you with like the 30,000-foot question. We have heard at the end of the past couple of presidencies, people on the other side talking about wanting to prosecute. You had some Democrats urging the prosecution of George W. Bush for war crimes in the Iraq War. There were, of course, Republicans urging the same for Barack Obama. And now we get to the end of the Trump presidency. And, of course, my God, there is a laundry list of things that Donald Trump could be prosecuted for by both the federal level and the state level. But my concern has always been, we go down this road, then we are criminalizing politics, and people start understanding that if I lose this election, I could end up in jail. I understand that Donald Trump is an exception to all exceptions, but do we not have to keep that in mind? Do we not have to be cognizant of that fact that if we do jail a president, even if he deserves to be in jail, that we begin down a dangerous road.
Hey, it's Chris Hayes. This week on my podcast, Why Is This Happening? I'll be talking with writer Wright Thompson about nostalgia, memory, the South, and bourbon.
One of the things that really blew my mind doing this book is finding out that Kentucky, for instance, was in the Union. You know, of course, bourbon, which is the most nostalgic and mythologized of all drinks, of course, bourbon is made in a place that now pretends it lost a war it actually won. So, like, when you're looking at the South, you do need to understand the power and seductiveness of mythology and always be aware of the fact that if you aren't looking out for it, it will get you.
That's this week on Why Is This Happening? Search for Why Is This Happening wherever you're listening right now and subscribe.
We certainly have to have that concern, Joe. And Merrick Garland, if confirmed, most difficult decision will be whether to prosecute Donald Trump and other members of his administration. On the one hand, we don't want to look like this is the equivalent of lock him up, lock her up. On the other hand, people should be held accountable, and no person is above the law, including the president. As you indicated, Donald Trump's alleged criminality is of a different order. It's on a different scale than even allegations that were made against previous presidents.
Yeah, and Tom Rogers, we of course saw Donald Trump trying to get Joe Biden arrested and Joe Biden's son, family members arrested. We have the possibility of the Biden administration looking at criminal referrals for Jared Kushner and criminal referrals for Don Jr. from the Republican Senate Intel Committee. That is strong, but at the same time, you remember as well as I do, Gerald Ford deciding to end the long national nightmare, pardoning Richard Nixon. He knew it would likely cost him the presidency. It did. But of course, the Kennedy Center gave him a Profile and Courage Award for having the courage to make that tough decision. This would be an even tougher decision. Is Joe Biden in a better position if he moves forward and remembers Abraham Lincoln's words, with malice toward none?
Well, Joe, I think we have to look beyond the issue of just the prosecution of Donald Trump and think about the malignancy that Trump has caused on our overall politics and what we do about it. There were a lot of devastating things that happened last week, but there was nothing in my mind more devastating in terms of a statement about our politics, that after the riots, after all the legislators had to flee, a majority of Republican elected legislators came back to vote in support of the big lie. And what that really says is they believe their constituents still believe in Trump. And as you've said many times, this is a cult of personality. And given the fact that it's a cult of personality, I think we have to go after him as a person, not as the head of a political movement. I think if Biden Justice Department prosecutes him as in presidential acts, it's invariably going to be looking as if it's political revenge. And instead, we need to elevate the prosecution of him as a person, with state and local prosecutors taking the lead on what looked like a huge number of tax evasion, money laundering, illegal corporate payments, bank fraud. There's a lot there. And if he can be seen to be nothing more than a convicted felon, a white-collar criminal, a complete fraud on that basis, I think we have some way of detaching much more of that Republican constituency, which still seems to believe in this guy, and not enough of them, as we'll be seeing from impeachment, are willing to vote even now against him. How to separate the constituency's belief in him as a person. So I think the elevation of those prosecutions, not by the Justice Department, by local and state prosecutors, becomes imperative.
So, Tom, I'm looking at your 10-point guide, and one of them is to remove Donald Trump from the political playing field. What does that mean exactly? How do you go about doing it?
Well, I think that one of the things that we know about Trump is he says things out loud he shouldn't necessarily say, but are extremely revealing. back in the spring when I was talking about how they were going to take this whole electoral college overturned vote to Congress, he was actually saying this is all going to end up in Congress. Well, one thing he also said a number of months ago was, imagine if I lose, I might have to leave the country. I actually think if he is indicted here for the kind of criminal acts that I'm talking about, and obviously they need to be pursued with complete due process and fairness. But if he is, I think there is a chance he would flee the country, go to a country that we have no extradition treaty with a friendly president, maybe like Brazil. And I think this whole notion of going after him as a person, as the head of a personality cult, can really do an awful lot, not only to change this perception of people still believing in him, and therefore him being able to impose litmus tests on how congressmen act when it comes to all kinds of policy and political issues, and turn him into some level of a political irrelevant, which I think is absolutely doable if we go hard and fast at going after him on these other criminal activities.
So, Claire McCaskill, you can jump in with the next question, but I just wonder also about Trump's family members and these, lawyers or whatever you want to call them that are around him. I mean, shouldn't there be a plan to hold them accountable as well so that further criminal actions and incitements of riots or whatever can be stopped in their tracks?
Well, there's certainly enough evidence for disbarment of the clown car of lawyers that hung on till the end, clinging to the big lie. Rudy, Linwood, Sydney, whatever her name is. There's certainly a basis for that. And by the way, I should point out technically, in removing him from the political playing field, a lot of people have said if he's impeached, he can't run again. That's a separate vote the Senate has to take. They first would have to convict him and remove him from office. Then there's a second vote, which, by the way, is only a simple majority that would take to bar him from seeking for future office. But let me ask Paul this. Would it make more sense in terms of Trump wanting to be a martyr? Would it make more sense to focus on his crimes that were financial? That have to do with him both grifting off the presidency and the fraud that we're all pretty certain he committed as part of his business dealings prior to taking the presidency. Does that isolate his behavior as a crook, but not make him a political martyr in terms of the public at large?
It might have that impact, Claire, but Donald Trump's most egregious acts are precisely the ones that he's committed in office as president. So I think he should be investigated and prosecuted for inciting the insurrection at the Capitol and for trying to get the Georgia officials to steal the election for him and for obstructing justice in the countless investigations of his administration. The advantage of a state prosecution is that Trump couldn't pardon himself. That wouldn't be true even if he's prosecuted by, say, the Southern District of New York. But at this point, a prosecution for bank or insurance fraud would not sufficiently capture Trump's criminal exposure or his just deserts.
Paul Butler, thank you. Tom Rogers, thank you as well. The new piece is online for Newsweek. And still ahead, former DHS Secretary Michael Chertoff on the security failure at the Capitol last week and why he says to, quote, buckle up over the next few weeks and months. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Hi, it's MSNBC's Hayes Brown. You know, these days there's just so much news to wrap your head around, it's challenging to get a deeper understanding of things. So every morning, go beyond the headlines with MSNBC Daily. It features written perspectives from people you know and trust, including Trymaine Lee, Mehdi Hasan, Liz Plank, and Frank Figliuzzi. They'll take you inside the most important issues of our times. Issues like systemic racism, domestic terrorism, and how we can bridge our political divide. Plus, you'll get a fresh take every morning from me. Start your day with MSNBC Daily at msnbc.com.